Welcome to a new Team CGC 9.8 video, and today I wanted to talk about two Bronze Age CGC 9.8s that I think are a really good investment right now. And a couple caveats, because with Bronze Age, obviously there's so many iconic books during that time period. Hulk 181, First Wolverine. Like in the 9.8s, I think that one is like $150,000, and I think there's like one or two on the planet. And yeah, generally in Bronze Age, I think the Wikipedia kind of definition of it was 1970 to 1986 is the Bronze Age of comic books. In those early 70s, obviously the 9.8s are so rare, they're so expensive. So I wanted to focus on books that were somewhat affordable, about around $1,000. And I think there's quite a few books out there that are really good investments in that price range. And I think I have two right here I'm going to show you that I think are right at the top of that list. So the first book is Amazing Spider-Man 238. And of course you got the first Hobgoblin in this book. This one's in the 9.8 white pages, manufactured with the tattoos. And looking on the CGC census for this book, and one of the main reasons why I'm recommending both of these books is because on the CGC census, this one in particular, only 8.6% of all graded Amazing Spider-Man 238s are CGC 9.8s. So 8.6%, that's a pretty low percentage comparatively. So it's quite rare in the 9.8s. So, more rarity, better investment, essentially. So 8.6% of all copies are 9.8s. There's 377 of these, of 9.8s on the census. So you're getting a 1 in 377 collection item. And with the Hobgoblin, this issue specifically, obviously manufactured with the tattoos. This one comes with the tattoos. I've seen ones without the tattoos on there. And just looking on the CGC census, right now, I noticed there's not like they don't make a difference between with or without the tattoos. So the 377 9.8s on the CGC census, the way I'm reading it anyway, is that those could be with or without the tattoos, as well as they could be off white pages, which a lot of them are actually on eBay for this particular issue, quite a few of them. So that, that 377 9.8 number, it's probably a lot lower because if you're specifically looking for one with the tattoos in the 9.8 white pages. So this is likely even more rare than what the sort of CGC census says. And definitely, correct me if I'm wrong, because that's how I sort of read the census. They didn't have a specific census without the tattoos, so I'm kind of assuming they just bunched them all in there. So yeah, likely even more rare than what the census shows, but if you just kind of take the census for what it is, 8.6%, that's a really low number, so it's quite rare in the 9.8s. Now obviously in this book you get the first Hobgoblin. There's been some cover swipes of this cover throughout the years too. Just a really cool cover, super awesome. And there are a couple more reasons why this issue is a buy too, besides just the CGC census. But I'll get into the next issue really quick too, and then I'll kind of bring it all back, because there's a few reasons why both of these issues I think are buys right now. So second issue I would recommend in the Bronze Age, somewhat affordable issue, is Star Wars #1. So this is the sort of more common 30-cent variant, because the 35-cent variant, actually on the census this morning, there's no 9.8s in it. So this is kind of your only option if you're looking for 9.8 white pages in Star Wars. So first appearance of Star Wars in comics. And one sort of misconception I would say about this issue, a lot of people are like, oh well, it's not the first Star Wars because the movie came out before and this and that. Well, actually, this Star Wars 30-cent issue came out before the movie was released. So this is, the first Star Wars in comics. And yeah, just that little tidbit, a lot of people, I think, somewhat put down this issue for some reason because, Number one, it's not the 35-cent variant, which there was only 1,500 ever printed. So, I mean, how are you ever going to find one of those anyway for a reasonable price? You're not, basically. Yeah, and the other reason being that a lot of people think that, oh, well, the movie came out and then the comic came out like a year later. Like, no, this came out before the movie, so this is really, you know, the first appearance of Star Wars in comics, but, you know, first appearance of Star Wars. And I think maybe some of the confusion comes from, you know, in the CGC slab it just says Part 1 Star Wars A New Hope movie adaptation. So they're not like, yeah, this is the first appearance of Leia and Luke, and, you know, they don't kind of go through that. But first appearance of Star Wars in comics, I think is a great buy right now. If you look at the census, it sort of reinforces that. There's 7.5% of all graded copies are 9.8s. So that's a pretty low ratio, a favorable ratio for investment. You know, anything under 10 is, you're looking at a pretty rare comic in the 9.8s. Obviously this comic coming from 1977, a little bit older, so it's going to be a little bit more rare in the 9.8s. That's generally how it goes. But I think that's still a really favorable ratio when you kind of look at all comics. Yeah, so 7.5% of these are 9.8s. There's 566 9.8s of these out there. And yeah, those wouldn't even be all white pages either. This is a 9.8 white pages. Some of those would be off white pages. And yeah, you know, with Star Wars, you're getting that iconic brand. It's quite an old book too. In the 70s, you know, when you're getting into 9.8s, I've particularly been looking at a lot of Uncanny X-Men from the 70s. And yeah, all those, once you get into the 9.8s in the 70s, all of them are over $1,000, and the keys are a lot more expensive than that. Like, you know, First Phoenix, you know, you got people in the 9.8 white pages asking for like $11,000 for, you know, the First Phoenix. Whereas this issue, you know, you get the first Star Wars, such an iconic brand. And I still think it's actually a pretty affordable price. And obviously with the census, that's giving you good reason to invest too, with, you know, only 7.5% of them being 9.8s, and you're getting one of 566 of a collection item. In the white pages it would be even lower than that. And yeah, all those I think are really good things. Now I do have kind of, and I kind of touched on a couple of them, but we'll get into pricing, but I do have just kind of 3 reasons why both of them I think are really good investments. And the first reason just being they're both like super iconic brands. So, you know, you got Spidey and Star Wars. They're just so iconic, each of them. You're not going to really have to worry about like bubbles forming or, and I mean, you know, that's not to say if like a Hobgoblin movie came out, the price of the issue wouldn't inflate and go up, but especially right now, you're not really seeing any of that kind of activity going on. And with an iconic brand, you know, I would say there's Spidey, there's Star Wars, there's Batman. You know, there's not too many like super iconic brands out there that, you know, you could pretty much be happy if you have a long time horizon. You could pretty much be happy just like buying these, putting them away, and like they're not going to plummet in price. You're not going to buy them super inflated, especially now. So, and if you can do that with iconic brands, I think that's a really good investment decision. And I've already done a video on Star Wars, you know, thinking that, you know, there's kind of a lot of Star Wars hate right now, where the Star Wars community is kind of complaining about the new movies, and I wouldn't say it's like the best time for Star Wars right now, which is making the issues better priced, more affordable. So right now I actually think is a good time to buy like either Star Wars #1 or Star Wars 42. I would recommend, or maybe even some of the like later low print issues. I would stick to the key issues, even though I would, you know, recommend Star Wars 9.8. Stick to the key issues. So yeah, first reason, super iconic brands, both of these. Second reason is first appearances, and you know, you always want to have that kind of tangible reason to invest in a comic. I generally only invest in key issues, or issues that have become keys over time for some reason. Maybe there's not a first appearance or an origin, but it's either a new artist or a cool cover or whatever it might be that's making it a key issue. So yeah, with both of these issues, you get first Hobgoblin, first Star Wars in comics. So you got that kind of tangible key issue reason to buy the comics, as well as they're both iconic brands. And the third reason, which I kind of touched on, is right now there's not really any hype for any of the characters in these comics. I would say a little bit less on the Spidey end, obviously with Far From Home coming out, but I think Hobgoblin being the first appearance in this one, you're not going to have many people sort of seeing Far From Home and then running out to get the Hobgoblin issue. So for both reasons right now, I think these brands are a little bit on the low. They're or at least some of the characters in the issues are just not being talked about right now. And that's pretty much how you want to position yourself when you're investing in comics, is rather than seeing the newest trailer, the newest movie, and then going out and purchasing the characters that were in the movie of the books and things like that. That's probably not the way you want to go about it, just because there's sort of hardcore collectors out there that might have 2 or 3 issues of a certain issue, and when they see that, oh, maybe I could sell this because a new movie's coming out and I'll be able to get like double what I paid, or so they're the sort of smart money will put those issues on the market when the movies are coming out. So not the best environment to try to pick up something at a good price. But right now, obviously I sort of touched on the Star Wars hate that I think is kind of going on now, just with I think the direction Disney's taking Star Wars. I'd say maybe half of Star Wars fans don't really like that direction. So I think right now is a really good time to buy 9.8 Star Wars for that reason. And obviously Far From Home, but there's no Hobgoblin, so Spidey's not too popular right now. And just looking on eBay too, it was about a week ago now, but I was seeing quite a few 238s on eBay. So yeah, it might be a decent time to maybe pick up a 238. Now let's talk about prices really quick. So my Star Wars #1, I purchased this, it was just around Christmas at an auction last year, and I thought I got a really good price for it. I mean, just given first Star Wars in comics, I ended up paying $960 for it, so that's putting it about 1,200 Canadian, and yeah, I think that's a pretty good price. You're seeing, or I was seeing some buy it nows at that time, anywhere from like 1,200 to 1,400 US, depending on the seller. And if you notice in this one, it's quite well centered as well, whereas yeah, the Star Wars ones, for some reason, they're quite off-centered. They look a little funky as far as centering, and just with like the UPC code, sometimes you're not going to get like the full black there, or you get that huge white bar of the back cover. So this kind of just has a little bit of the white bar, but a really nice example of Star Wars 1. So I think for Star Wars 1 right now, that's probably about the best price you're going to get. $960 US, $950 US, maybe 900 if you could find this would be a great deal. But even to buy it now, a little bit over 1,000 if you're a huge Star Wars fan, I think that might not be the worst buy right now. Maybe get a buy it now in that 1,100, 1,200 range. Maybe you could get it for $100 less if you found the perfect auction. But I think with these iconic brands, you're not going to have to worry about them going away or the books plummeting, and I think in fact it'll be the opposite. Over time, they just become more and more sought after. Now that Disney essentially owns both of these brands, there's going to be a couple movies every year moving forward here, because they have shareholders to please and profits to make. So Both of these brands are going to be in pop culture for the next 50 to 100 years, guaranteed. And yeah, if you're thinking in that like super long time frame, I could just like, I mean, first Star Wars in comics, you know, in 10 or 20 or 30 years, I think is going to be worth a lot more than $1,000 US. And yeah, an Amazing Spidey 238 with the Hobgoblin, maybe a little bit less iconic, but you certainly have like a cult Hobgoblin following, I would say, as well as just it's such a key issue within the Amazing Spider-Man range, and both of them, as again, quite rare in the 9.8s. So just sort of the kind of tangible technical reason, you know, pretty rare in the 9.8s. There's not very many of them. Yeah, with this one, it's one of 377, one of 566. So, you know, for such iconic kind of first appearances, I think these are two really, really good issues. Prices with the Amazing Spider-Man 238. So buy it now's, you're seeing anything from like 1,300 to like 1,600, 1,700 US. You know, some people trying to get like 2,000, almost 2,000 Canadian for these, so that's, yeah, getting to that kind of 1,600, 1,700 US. That's going to be kind of the top range. I did see one earlier this year, and I think it was an auction in Canada, and it's, yeah, one I probably maybe should have bought and grabbed another copy, but it ended up going for about $1,000 US, $1,000 for Amazing Spider-Man 238. That is one of the cheaper I've seen since I've been looking at the markets the last 2 years. This one I purchased, it was 1,150 US, and it was on an auction from quite a popular seller, so maybe a bit of an overpay, but still was really happy to just get like a pristine Amazing Spider-Man 238 with the tattoos. So yeah, you know what, as far as affordable Bronze Age books, you almost cannot do too much better than both of these, I think, and especially for the time that we're in. You know, I know in a year or two there's probably going to be another Star Wars movie, and you know, maybe the hype will build during that time, and you know, Star Wars #1 I don't think will be less than $1,000 US. Yeah, so I think there's a couple reasons that sort of are conspiring, I would say, to make these books pretty decent investments right now. Not a lot of hype, so you know, I had a couple Batman picks that I kind of wanted to throw in here, and you know, maybe do 3 or 4 Bronze Age picks, but you know, with all those Batman movies coming out, I would say right now might not be the best time to get into Batman. I mean, maybe you might still have maybe a month, but you know, once the Joker movie comes out, and then Robert Pattinson being the new Batman, and the Batman movie is, obviously all the ideas are being kicked around right now, and the rumors are on all the comic book and superhero sites out there. So that hype is starting to rise, so Batman I didn't recommend, but obviously Spider-Man Far From Home is coming out, but I think with Hobgoblin you're not really getting into that hype train too much. And Star Wars 1, I think right now is probably one of the best buys out there in a 9.8 white pages. If you can get that under $1,000 US, I think that's a great buy, and I could see that in, you know, 20 years being $3,000 or $4,000, and that might not happen, but I could just see it possibly happening. And you know, especially I know the 35-cent ones are so rare, and but that I would say is kind of getting into those issues that I talked about in the first half of videos. They're so rare, they're just unattainable for most people. So yeah, sticking around that kind of $1,000-ish range, I think these are probably some of the 2 best books you can go about grabbing as an investment. So thanks so much for watching the video, guys. I got my collection here. I got so many more ideas and video titles I've been kicking around, and that's going to be all coming in the next month. So thanks so much for watching the video. Thank you very much. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and thanks for watching. I will see you on the next video.